everybody, welcome back. This is the next episode of From the Suggestion Box, navigating feedback, the good, the bad, and the say what. Today, my special guest is Zach Pritchard, and he is the owner and CEO of All Around Financial Coaching and the host of All Around Wellness podcast. He is on a passion to destroy self-deception around money and personal growth. Zach, thank you so much for being here. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Good. So here's the thing, right? You talked about two of my favorite things, money and personal growth, which I need help with both. So, but this isn't about me. This is about you. So the first thing we're going to do is ask you about any type of crazy feedback that you have ever received. It could be personal, it could be professional, and it would be amazing for me if it happened to tie into maybe like your budgeting practices, but don't force it if you don't have to, but just tell us, give us some kind of crazy feedback, good, bad, something that makes us go say what, and how you had to grow from that.
So the two things, the one that kind of focuses on the budget, I guess, is the, feedback from my wife of always getting, going overdraft in our account in college. Like it was just constant. And so that was really when I started focusing on the budget and figuring out that piece of it and what got my interest in it. But the most recent, the most dramatic feedback that I got is being fired from my first time ever being fired. And it was from a job that I worked 5.5, 6 years, and I worked very closely with the owner. And so there was a lot of, communication lost in that process. And so, not to go into a long story of it, but it went into a downhill spiral of, now I lost my value, what I thought I had. And, I was always the guy that told everybody, your value is not in the job you have, it's in your ability to create an income. And I guess I just kicked that out of my own head. And it's like, I don't even want to listen to myself. And so it took me a while to kind of build that back up, and a lot of that communication with myself and evaluation of myself. And I actually started writing a book because of that, about communication. So there's a lot to learn there, and I'm still learning a lot about the communication side of it, but it's more from an experience level than anything, just to kind of see how it all ties into each other in that process. So
yeah, no, that's harsh, right? Especially working somewhere for 5 years and then just, oh, by the way, thanks, but no thanks. Like, yeah, like that's definitely some, what, did they give you any explanation? Was there like an exit interview? Because I know you said communication is very key. Did they communicate to you at all? Anything of why that may have happened?
So there was very vague communication there at the end. So, I made a mistake. I was moving into a full-time sales role, and which is where I wanted to go. I was really excited about it, because so I'm moving into this new role, and we never had a full-time salesperson. So I was creating a lot of the process, doing a lot of the grunt work to get it going, while training other people at the same time. So there was a lot of lack of communication between me and my boss in that process. But I went to work Thursday, or I think it was Thursday morning, and I realized I made a mistake, and I dropped the ball on a contract that we had that could have been an easy one, but it was still up in the air. And so once I realized I made that mistake, I emailed everybody in the company, and or the 4 main people that I kind of talked to the most. And when I did that, nobody responded, but my boss called about 3:00 that afternoon, kind of asked me what happened, and kind of went over it. And then he just made the comment of, well, I don't know if you're going to be here on Monday. And so I was like, there was a big, like, I'm not going to deny it. I got angry at that point, and I didn't do anything or say anything, but in my own body, I was on fire.
Yeah.
Because I didn't understand because it was a guy, like I started with this company when there was 3 of us. It was me, my boss, and another guy. And I grew it, helped grow it to where we had 12 people. And so I worked with him very closely for that long. And the trust was gone. Like there was something was missing there. And I tie it a lot back to communication. Like I didn't communicate to him what I was doing very well. And then he wasn't communicating to me that I wasn't, living up to his expectations. And so that's, yeah. So the communication was big in that process. And I think if you could go back, and we got a whole nother idea on that hindsight's 2020 kind of concept, but if I could go back, there's a lot of things I could do to communicate to him and then ask for help. I think that was a big thing for me, but just not asking for that help hey, I'm struggling here. I've never done this before. What do I need to do? That type of mentality. But
I love that because especially as managers and volunteers, we always feel like we have to do it all on our own. And a lot of times we are a department of one. So then we feel even more so like we have to do it all on our own. And we're like, I got this, I can do this. I am superhuman. And then we get to that point where stuff starts falling through the cracks and balls start dropping. But we still won't ask for help. And so it's almost that whole but then it's a spiral, because kind of like you were talking about, like your self-worth starts to go down because you're dropping balls, you're missing deadlines, you're starting to stuff is starting to fall through the cracks. And then you start to internalize it. I'm a horrible manager. I can't handle all this. And no, it's not that you can't handle it. You're managing 300, 400, 500 people in your department of one, and you're not asking for help. Yeah. So, and that could come from, who knows, it could come from maybe your boss will be nice enough to get you a part-time helper, or maybe even a full-time helper, or maybe somebody else in the organization can help pick up some slack, but nobody's really going to know until you speak up and you ask for help. And there's no shame in that. You don't have to be embarrassed. You don't have to feel bad about that. But I feel like a lot of times people they're afraid to ask because it might make it seem like they're incompetent and they can't handle it and they can't do their job and they don't want to lose their job. So, absolutely. I think that what you said is valued. So let's do this. If you could do it again, and you did have to give your boss feedback in terms of maybe how he was managing you or anything like that, how would you have done it? Learning what you learned.
I think there'd be a kind of a set line of communication there that's I guess it's strategic and planned out more than just, hey, I'm available type of thing. Because I was the same way. I told my guys, hey, I'm available. Just let me know if you need anything. But we need more accountability than that within ourselves. So I think for me, it would be more of, hey, let's meet once a week, once every 2 weeks, whatever that number is. But there'd be, a couple months before we would even, we may have a couple phone calls, a couple discussions on the phone, but we wouldn't meet face to face for 2 months. In my own calendar to say, hey, I want to have a conversation with you. Let's sit down every month, every week, whatever he's available for, instead of just having that arbitrary, hey, I'm available to you type of thing. And I think that's where a lot of leaders and business owners kind of fail, even volunteer owners especially, because in the volunteer world, it's even harder to lay out that communication with the team, because they're there on their own time, and so you're trying to you're battling a whole different animal at that point, because they're not getting really anything out of it but maybe some satisfaction, and then you don't really get to choose who you hire, what volunteers come in. So you're just happy to have bodies, and that some of those bodies may not need to be there because of their attitudes and such. And so it just creates that real issue there. And so that's where I would go back to, is just setting that everybody's on the same page. Hey, we're going to meet every so often, no matter what. And I would do that with my team. I would set up, not just a team meeting, but specific meetings with my direct guys. And I think, you can get into a lot of kind of team management, but one person can only manage like 5 to 6, 7 guys at a time. If you get more than that, you really you lose track of who they are and what they're about, and what they have going on in their personal life that's affecting their career, and kind of go all down that road. So that kind of answers your question a little bit.
Yeah, no, that was great. Okay, so let me ask you this. I'm gonna kind of, change gears here. For me personally, right? I love that you're a money guy, because if there's anything that I am not, it is not the money person. Okay. And many volunteer managers fall into this position, right? They were happily working in this other department or this other department, and then all of a sudden now they are responsible for all of these amazing, wonderful people who are giving of their time to an organization. And every year, or the same time, every year, then all of a sudden their supervisor says, I need you to give me your budget predictions for the next fiscal year. And you're like, what? You're like, wait, I'm living paycheck to paycheck with my own bank account, and you want me to manage a budget of 6 figures? I don't even know what that looks like all at once. I've seen like a 1 and a 2, like I've seen 6 figures, but not all in the same line with commas. And now I'm expected to budget for a department and make sense of that. Like, I don't know, what would you tell somebody? What kind of feedback would you give a manager for the first time who's never grown into that, who doesn't really, maybe doesn't even, balance their checkbook, and now they're responsible for this huge budget? Like, what do you do with that?
So it's funny you go into that, because I have a blog on my website that the title is, would you fire you? And it's basically talking about, like, if you were a business and you hired yourself to manage your own budget, would you fire you? And so it's basically talking about that. Like, would you trust somebody? Like, if you were looking onto this business and they were managing like you're managing it, would you say, hey, what are you doing? You're barely making it every 2 weeks, and you're living paycheck to paycheck, like income to income, whatever that is. And so what I would tell them is, you got to start. Yeah, you have this major goal of $100,000 budget, but start small. Like, number one, you got to start looking at your own budget, because if you can't manage your own, you're going to struggle to manage the big budget. So, figure out, start small. Like, and I'm kind of building it now, but I'm working on some small kind of mini courses to help people change their budget behavior around finances. And so getting out of that living paycheck to paycheck, how do you even start budgeting? And so what I like to focus on is the why. Why are you wanting to change your budgeting habits? Like, what does that picture look like, a year from now, when you've actually done some good budgeting? And what good does that, but what good does budgeting $100,000 do for that organization? Like, what is the why behind sticking to that $100,000 budget? And then you kind of go into, self-communication. And this is a kind of a merge in and out of the business and the personal finances, but a self-communication of kind of how you think about money and how you think about budgeting and that type of thing, and the self-accountability. Like, if I say I'm only going to spend X on groceries or 200 on groceries, can I hold myself to that? And a lot of people can't. And that's the biggest problem is, they may do an overall budget of, I'm going to spend 300 on groceries this month. And then they go to the end of the month, they don't have a clue. But if they were to go back and look, they probably spent 600 on groceries. And so that's where I start small. I start with I break that large goal down into small increments. And at the very beginning, it's a daily thought process. So what do I need to do today to change my budgeting behavior? And that's, okay, I don't need to go out to eat because that'll bust my budget. I don't need to go to the grocery store for the 5th time this week. And so it's just that mentality of, you got to talk about what you need to do today, because you got to start somewhere.
Right.
You can't start thinking about the month or the year, because then you lose hope and you don't gain anything. So I think what I would tell them is to break those goals down into weekly, monthly, quarterly goals into that year, and say, okay, in this season, we typically spend X on, office supplies, or, whatever it may be. And then in this season, we spend X on, food for caterings or whatever, or look at the month, because this month maybe you spend 100 on office supplies, and next month you're spending 400 on office supplies. So there's a lot of that ebb and flow. And so if you've got any kind of track record, that's what you want to look at. So in my budget course, the third lesson is going back to last month and seeing, what are you spending on groceries? What are you spending on gas? What are you spending on food or restaurants? Like, what have you spent on in the past? And let's use that to project the future. So that's one of my main lessons, is trying to figure out and gather data, not trying to change a whole lot yet, just trying to understand what's going on from that standpoint. So I do the same thing in the big budget. So, and don't even look at like the large number, like cut the zeros off, make it $100, and what would you do, and just cut those zeros down so it doesn't seem so overpowering in your plan.
I love that. I love that because so I mean, what I'm hearing, like, if it's, let's just say I'm a new volunteer manager, or maybe if I've been in it for a while and numbers just are not my thing, because I mean, there's a lot of things I'm really good at. Numbers is just not it. And I like what you said, looking at that track record, what I could have learned if in my first or second year in the position, I just went to my finance or the accounting team and was like, can you run me what was spent the year before and the breakdown of what it was spent on? Because then I can look at, and like you said, I can look at what happened in the past and be like, oh, well, maybe in this month, we typically have this larger event, so we need to budget larger during this month. And then, in 2 or 3 other months, because we don't have that event, we don't have to budget as much, that whole kind of thing, and understanding what those line items are and asking for that feedback going into it. Because let me tell you, I sat and I looked at that thing and I was like, I don't know. Let's just throw that number in here and throw that number here a number, there a number. And then I would just literally be putting in numbers anywhere and be like, oh, well, I think, we might spend this on this, and we might, complete guessing. Yeah. And then hit the sum at the end and be like, does it all add up? Okay, cool. Here you go. And like, but I had no idea. Like I said, I barely did my own budget, which I did do one, but it was literally just enough. And I was one of those people like, well, so long as they're close, I was never the person to be like down to the penny. Like, that would drive me nuts. So I'd be like, well, we'll round up to the next like $5 and we'll be good, so, but a lot of times in your organizations and things like that, you can't do that because they're looking down to the penny. So it's like, if you're never used to doing that, how do you, and especially like you said, if you're not used to doing it with a smaller budget, now you have this gargantuan thing in front of you. And it's like, what am I supposed to do with this? So I really like that. Start looking at the track record from what was happening before and start small. I think that is brilliant. Yeah.
And it also tells you, like, looking at that track record tells you what it may, what may need to be cut out. So for personal budgets, like a lot of what people see is they do that previous month exercise that I give them. They go down and they say, okay, I'm spending, and what I tell them is, look at your statement And every line item you say, okay, that was restaurant, okay, that was groceries, that was gas, and add those up as separate categories. And what a lot of people see is that, like, I spent what on restaurants? Like I went, like, I spent $1,000 on eating out, and that's like, okay, we can't do that no more. And so they'll, I had to have a client that they would spend $1,200 eating out every month. And it was just like, I couldn't even fathom that. And so once they saw that, though, they were like, well, there's $800 easy. They could save $800 just thinking about it. And so it was just that mentality, but they still had the habit of going out to eat. So they had to break that habit somehow. And breaking that habit means, okay, today I don't go out to eat. Tomorrow I don't go out to eat. And then, maybe Thursday or Friday I go out to eat. And then the next day I don't go out to eat. And then the next, I kind of plan it out. It's like I get, one time a week to go out to eat, and kind of start to trickle that back and kind of tail that back a little bit. So you do the same thing in that big budget. Okay. If the guy before me was spending, $30,000 on X in a year, maybe we don't need to spend $30,000 on that. Maybe we need to spend 10, and he was not paying attention to it. And that's why there's a change of management. So
Yeah.
there's a lot that goes into that, but it's just breaking it down.
Yeah. I like that. I like that. I like that. I like that a lot. Okay. So I'm changing gears back. I'm going back again because there's just like so much good stuff. So I saw somewhere you had written down, when I thought this was fascinating, and it just really goes back to what you were talking about earlier, communication, because feedback, that's literally all feedback is communication, and it's just how it is being communicated. And I saw where you had put something about having conversations and the difference between a typical conversation and an honest conversation. Can you talk to me about that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll put it in, or paint a picture in my marriage, so to speak. And it was the same, like, looking back, it's the same way in the business and same thing. But what really spoke to me in my marriage was, we've been married 10 years, and, for the last, I guess, back up a little, while I was still in that job, there was a period of time where, I'd go to work, come home, go to bed, do the same thing over and over again. And we would talk, and I would talk with my wife. We'd talk about the kids. We'd talk about work. We'd talk about what we're doing this weekend and that type of thing. And, we'd go on a date every now and then. But there was no, well, I say there's no, so this is the kind of story behind it was, we'd talk all day long once I got home. And usually I'm the talker of the family or of the relationship. So I would start talking about work and kids and, what we're doing. And then, at the end of the night, she's like, well, we never communicate. We never talk. And I'm just like and maybe it's a man thing, but it was just not clicking for me to say, I just spent, the last 2 hours talking with you. Like, I don't understand. So after thinking about that, I'm like, okay, there's more to that communication that I'm missing, and I'm not seeing what she's wanting. And so by kind of diving into that, it was really having that honest communication where, you're diving into speaking each other's opinions about more than just the day-to-day stuff. And so, you got to think about what grows your relationship. It's the feedback, it's the communication. Like, how are we doing in this area of our life? How am I doing in my career? What do you think about my career? What is your perspective of me? So my book on the communication has, there's 4 main areas or avenues of communication, but then there's 10 characteristics of that communication that they all play into. So think about it as a spider web of communication where, honest communication is in the middle. And then you have, 4 rings of these certain avenues of communication. And then there's these diagonal lines that kind of intersect all of those areas that all tie into, kind of funnel down into that honest communication, or kind of funnel out from that. if you have honest communication within every relationship you have, you can begin to grow in every relationship that you have. So whether it's career, spouse, and strangers, like the stranger one kind of catches people like, well, I don't care. I don't want to have a conversation with them. But there's so many conversations that I've had with strangers that, I can see both sides. If I'm not completely open and honest with them, then I don't get anything out of it. But there's a example in the book of me being on a plane, and I sat down next to this guy, and we spent half the plane ride, and I'm kind of watching this guy, and like he's on his computer working, and I'm acting like I'm reading the book, but I'm kind of watching him to see what he's doing, and it kind of caught my attention. And he's got this calendar out, and he's got this like project stuff going. And at the time, I was a project manager, and so I'm seeing this happen. I'm acting like I'm reading my book, but I'm not reading my book. And so I'm seeing this, and I have that like mental, like, do I say something? Do I ask him what he's doing? Is that nosy? I like kind of going through that in my head, and I finally get to the point. We got like 20 minutes left in the flight, and I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna ask. So I put my book down. I was like, man, I'm just curious. You piqued my interest. It's like, what are you working on? So he goes into this project management spill, and I was like it kind of opened my eyes. Like, this is awesome, because this is what I need. Right? Organize it all and go through that. So we got into a conversation, and as the more open and honest I was about what I was struggling with, the more he was able to give, and we were able to, I guess, give me another outlook, another viewpoint on project management. And so had I said, hey, what are you working on? He's like, oh, I'm project management thing. And then I left it at that. And it's like, okay, cool. I would have never got anything out of it. And so, and that goes to, that was one example. The book is going to be full of personal examples of, my life, and with marriage and career, and how a lot of these situations could have played out had I went into deeper conversation with them, or had I not, or since I didn't get much out of it. And, or, me and my wife were struggling to connect at a different level. And, because there was several times there was like, well, we don't even know each other. Like, and you hear that a lot, but nobody knows, or nobody realizes how to get out of that. And it's really being open and completely honest. I think, a lot of it, we talk about expectations in the book. We talk about trust. We talk about perspective. Like, what is her perspective of me? What is my perspective of her? What is my perspective of myself? And, what is my expectation of myself? And the whole book begins with self-communication and having an honest conversation with yourself. Like, do you trust yourself? And you kind of go down that road and have to build that before you can build. I mean, just think about it. You can't have a honest conversation with somebody else if you don't trust yourself. Or if you can't even have the honest conversation with yourself, then you're not going to be able to do it with your spouse or with anybody else. So it just doesn't play out that way.
That is phenomenal. Because it is so true. If you are not confident or I love what you said. If you don't trust your own self, and if you can't have that honest conversation with yourself, how can you lead somebody else? How can you give honest feedback to somebody if you can't even talk to yourself honestly? And everything that you were saying, and I love that you brought up the stranger part, because as we manage volunteers, right, we're getting new volunteers that are coming in all the time, and we have to learn them and learn who they are, because that the more we learn and understand who they are, the better fit we can match them in the organization and which department that they would thrive in. But all of that comes in through communicating and listening and hearing what they have to say and being honest and asking honest questions, and even opening it up and us being honest and almost revealing a part of who we are to get them to be able to do the same. It's almost like we have to lead by example and start that communication. Absolutely. And And I love that like you took that chance, and you would have never gotten something that you needed because you were just gonna let it go. And I'm always harping on, find a mentor, find somebody who is not in it, like whatever you are in, like not in the situation, who is standing on the outside looking in to help give you guidance, to help you see a different perspective. Because
Yeah.
when you're in it and you're in the weeds, you can't see any of that. And it could take somebody like
Yeah.
3 seconds to just look over and be like, hey, the light switch is just like 3 inches higher. And you're like, I've been looking for it for an hour. And you're like, just go a little bit, and it's amazing what somebody, when you're not caught up in it, when somebody's standing on the outside looking in, how they can help guide you. But again, that also comes from not being afraid to ask for that feedback, to ask. And so, okay, so let's go here. Okay. Asking for feedback, right? Do you think there is a difference between how females respond to it and how males respond to it, right? So because I'm sitting here like, oh, you should ask for feedback. And I got to tell you, sometimes somebody will say something and like my feelings are just hurt, right? And then I go back and I tell my fiance, and he was like, what's the problem? And I'm like, but. And it's like literally the same words. But I know sometimes I will take it much more personal. Do you think it's just a makeup of who we are? Like, I don't know. I'm totally putting you in your spot. I know you're not a psychologist, but you're a man. So tell me. I don't know.
And I don't think it's necessarily just a female versus male thing. Like I wouldn't segregate them in 2 separate paths, but I think it's like you said, it's a makeup of who we are and how we respond. So one of the challenges that me and my wife have is I'm a very direct person. So when I speak, I'm going to speak directly, and she's very a total opposite. And so, but when I speak direct, and so that's not how she wants me to speak to her. And so like, and I've always I struggled with empathy. Like I say I've struggled with empathy in the sense of I can understand, but it's hard for you to get people to make them feel like you feel how they're feeling, if that makes sense. And so, with in regards to that communication with your spouse, like there's a lot of that, my perspective of her, of, the way she responds. And so sometimes when I say something and she gets mad at it, it's like, okay, what was the problem? Was it the way I said it, or was it the way she heard it? And so how do you determine that? Like, well, I could have said it different, yeah, but she could have heard it different too. Like she could have not went to that assumption of, I was trying to attack her, or I was being mean, or like, but then that's where trust falls in. It's like, do you trust me? If you trust me, then you know that I'm not out to get you. And so I'm not just sitting there trying to attack you. It's just I'm not saying it in the right words, and you're taking it in the wrong way. And so I don't know that it's a segregated like one way or this way. I think it's a personality stance, and everybody's different. That's the whole challenge between communication. Like and that's the challenge between a leader in a private organization or a volunteer, is you have to struggle with that and try and figure out, how does this person respond? And I think that's why if you get past that 5 to 7 person that you're managing, you lose it. And volunteers, you probably know this just as well as I do, but when you're a volunteer, you don't usually just do 5 or 7, because the budget doesn't call for 17 managers for all 100 people. It's you got 2 managers for 100 people, and so you don't have that time to really connect with people. And I think that's what we're missing a lot of times, is that connection.
That is so powerful. Yes, because that connection will build trust. And then so if I ask a volunteer, like, how did it go? Because our trust level has been built up, even if they say something that might have come off or seemed a little harsh, I know them well enough to know that, like you said, they're not trying to attack me. That's just their personality. They could just be direct, like you were saying, and they're just saying what it is and moving on about their business. And that I know not to take that so personally. But if I haven't built that connection, if I haven't fostered that relationship, I'm just if it's somebody that I only talk to like once every 3 months, I'm going to feel like they're just coming at me when that's not even the case. That could just be their personality, and vice versa. If I say something to them and they don't really know me that well, they might think I'm always attacking or trying to be like nitpicking when they don't really know me well enough to know that I would never do anything like that. And I'm saying it out of love. I'm saying it out of care. I'm saying it out of because of the fact that I want us all to grow and be better. I think that is huge. And I think I feel like you have just posed a challenge to me, because in many organizations, the volunteer manager is the only one. And I know you said maybe two, but sometimes it's not even that. Like, I just saw a post the other day based off of a post that I did, and this lady had said that it was 3 people in her department, and they managed 1,500 volunteers in 3 different states. And that's normal. That's typical,
My
right?
goodness.
Volunteer managers are normally a department of 1, and they are managing, like I myself managed 300 to 400. Have I built a relationship with all? I sure haven't. And I can guarantee you the ones that I haven't built that relationship with are going to view me and view my words differently than those who I have, even though I'm saying the exact same thing. So I have just taken on the challenge of how can I be better about doing that, right? Even if it means it's 1 phone call a day for 365 days, that might be what it takes. Is that reality? Probably not. But I can't let that be an excuse. I cannot let the number of people that I manage and the busyness of my life be an excuse not to figure out a way to connect with my team and build that trust, because at the end of the day, that is what's going to help move the organization forward. Whew, man, you got me. You got me.
Absolutely.
You
It's a big mountain to climb, though. I mean, it's there's not going to be an arrival type thing. Like, it's going to be, you're going to ebb and flow through this process and figure out, I mean, how to make it work the best way. But you can't expect to be perfect in it either. And so you're gonna mess up and not get close enough to this person, or not get, that trust is going to be it. But you got to put things in place, or try to, that can help prevent this lack of communication. Even if it is like, you on paper, you are the manager of 25 or 30 or 50 people, maybe start to, find those people that are in that group and say, who can be a kind of a sub manager within that group, and say, hey, I need to mentor them. So, and then they pick, 5 or 10 people underneath them and start to mentor that process all the way down. Even though on paper it's 1 and 25 or 50 underneath, there's no hierarchy within those 50 people, but you can always find the people that are a little more leadership minded and kind of start to run that down. See if you can't improve that communication through that process.
I love that. I do. I'm gonna, what's gonna be a goal, and then like I'm gonna write you my list. I'm gonna be like, Zach, look, we did it. Man, I am encouraged. I am encouraged by that. A new perspective. So just, man. Okay. I'm back. I'm really over here because my brain is like going like this, but that is phenomenal. I love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. Okay. So I have 3 more questions for you. Number 1, has there been any piece of feedback from anybody, your wife, a boss, a child, that just like helped you grow in any way, shape, or form? For example, a past guest that I had, her son was in like kindergarten, and she had gone to the class to do something, and they were supposed to be doing like these little games and competitions, and everybody who won the game got a gift. But then afterwards, everybody in the class got a gift. And her son was like, Mom, you can't give everybody a gift because then it takes away from the person who won. And she was like, but I don't want anybody to be unhappy. And he was like, but Mom, you can't make everybody happy. Like at 5 years old, she was like, whoa, so I mean, has anything like that ever happened to you?
Maybe not from a 5-year-old. Well, I have a 5-year-old, but and they open my eyes to a lot of things every day. But I think the one that stands out to me, and it came from two sides, which is what, like, someone hit me from the right and someone hit me from the left. And so, from a business standpoint, I was told that, I don't do empathy well. I don't listen to people's situations. And I was like, whatever, you're just, you're not, I just blew it off. I was like, I don't care. And then, I started talking to my wife about it, and she's like, yeah, you don't do that very well. And I was like, oh. So it was like just a explosion of like, where did my self-image go? So that was a big thing. And I think that started probably, 2 years ago, I guess, 2 to 3 years ago, and probably started this whole, like, why do I feel like I do listen well, but she doesn't? And where there's a lack of communication there, like, we're not communicating what I feel to her so that she understands that I understand her. And so there's that, and that was even in the business side too. Like, my guys, I told them all the time, I was like, hey, if y'all have a problem, y'all want to change something, come talk to me. Well, they didn't want to do that because they knew I'm very direct. I'm very prideful in what I do, very passionate. And so they took that passion as almost arrogance, or, if they come talk to me, I'm going to tear them down. I'm going to shut them down and not really listen to what they have to say. But I can think of a lot of instances where they came up with an idea and we ran with it, and it worked, and it was great. But they only see the ones that, are the bad ones that I tore down. And maybe I tore them down based off past experiences because I was in the field doing it. I did it, and I know why this doesn't work. But just that communication barrier was there. And so, when they told me that, and when my wife told me that, it was just like, why is there this misunderstanding? Like, I didn't think I was that bad. Like, I'm not that bad, am I? But realizing that there is some level that I can do to help that. And so that was really I think the eye opener that made me start thinking about, hey, is the way I say something coming across wrong? And are they hearing it wrong at the same time? And so how do we merge those two, where they start to hear it a little bit differently, I start to say it a little bit differently, like we're both wrong and both right at the same time. So it's not a I'm right, you're wrong. It's we're both wrong, we're both right at a little bit. And so one important part of my book that I don't know that I've actually mentioned yet, but is iron sharpens iron. And so you have this conversation of, as you're having that conversation, like you if you have an idea, shave some of it off over here, shave some of it off over here, and you create a new product, a new idea, or whatever that is. So that's the idea between, especially in a team or volunteer space, is use your ideas to bounce off each other, and no one's got to have the one idea and you have to run with their idea. Like, let's merge them and make one better idea between the team. And so I think that's what started me on that process, was both of those avenues. Like, I was getting hit by, you don't listen very well, you don't listen to people, you don't have empathy for people. And it's kind of one of those, like, you don't pay attention to something that you're not good at until like 4 or 5 people tell you you're not good at it. So that's the one I can think of off the top of my head, but the big one anyway.
I love that. Specifically, because it ties back into what we were talking about earlier, that trust factor. Because your guys were like, yo, you don't listen. And you're like, whatever. You're like, okay, clearly, like, you don't listen. But then when you went home and told your wife and she said the same thing, it was like, it clicked.
Yeah.
As that level of trust is also there. And maybe had that level of trust been built more with them, you might have heard it easier or earlier or better or more welcome to it. But when it was reinforced by your wife, and it just goes back to everything that you've been saying, like communication is very much based in trust. And that level of trust can change how people hear what you were saying and how, like, what you're saying. I mean, that is like phenomenal. So I have to ask then, when they both said that, like, what did you do? Did you like Google how to become more empathetic and listen better? Like how did how did you respond to that? You wrote the book?
Yeah. I mean, I started looking at books, and I'm a big reader. So I was like, okay, I got to figure out this leadership, I got to figure out this issue. And so I can't remember if there was a specific book that I was drawn to, but I know there's a couple of podcasts that I listened to at the time, and I can't name them off the top of my head, but one of them stuck with me, and I put the caption on the background of my phone, and I put "seek to understand before being understood," which made me just kind of, every time I looked at my phone, I looked at it, I saw it, I was like, okay, I need to hear people before I try and give my opinion or my perspective or whatever. And so that was I think that was a big thing I started doing. And then I tried to control my mouth a little more. Try not to talk so much and let people speak their opinion. So especially with my wife, like, I don't give her enough time to speak her opinion. And so she just got to the point where she didn't want to, and because I would always overpower the conversation. And so there's a story in the book about how we were traveling on the road one time, and so I started into this deep conversation, and she had no idea we were going to have this conversation. And she was like, man, I feel like, why do we always have these conversations in the truck or in the car? And she's like, she felt trapped into that conversation. I was like, it's just where it's the easiest spot. We're right next to each other. The kids are either napping or doing something else, and so it's just that mentality. I never thought about her feeling trapped in that situation. So kind of got on a rabbit trail there, but that was the mindset before. And like I said, I can't think of one book or one thing, but it was just a combination of me going on this personal growth, binge watching or listening type thing, or reading. Like, at one point I had a goal of reading 24 books in a year, which is not much by some CEO standards. Like, they'll read one a week. And I'm like, where do you have the time? But so that was the kind of that push of me I got to figure out where. I think that was the self-awareness that I had to find out, like, where am I and what do I think about myself? Because I didn't have that perspective on myself. Like, and that's the one key area is that self-awareness. Do you have awareness of who you are, how you respond, how you talk? Are you a talker? Are you a quiet person? Like, all of those personality things. Like, do you know anything about yourself, so that you can start to connect and communicate with others?
Oh, that's great. I love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. Because and I know a lot of the references you're like talking about, like, you and your wife, but all I'm hearing, and it's like how I'm hearing it, right, is just in relation to my volunteers and the conversations that I have with them. And am I listening to them? Am I trying to be understood instead of trying to understand where they're coming from? I'm just hearing, like, I'm just picturing all the conversations that I'm having with them, and I'm like, man, like, this is all really, really good stuff. Man, this was good. This is good. All right, so go ahead.
One more thing I wanted to mention, like, the one thing that you got to kind of realize is that, the trust that you have with your spouse, or the conversations you have with your spouse, how does that affect your conversations with your team? So if you wake up one morning and y'all have a complete disaster of a conversation, but you got to go, you have to go to work. Now you're already angry. You're already at this level, high level of anger or aggravation. And now you're taking it out on your guys or your team. And that's blowing the communication at that point. And so, you say something and they're not listening. And so then the job doesn't get done, or, domino effect all the way down and then back. And so there I think that's kind of where the book starts to try and tie in, like, how does this affect this and this affect this, and how does it all tie together? And like it's emotions, and they run wild. So you got to be careful what you say, when you say it, and all that kind of stuff. So
that is so good. Because in my case, because I've been a single mom most of my life, and not necessarily the spouse, but that preteen or teenage girl, those conversations before going on to work, probably not always the best. And having to make sure I manage that before I see anybody, because, we're not going to talk about that, because she's grown out of it and she's grown into a beautiful young woman. And, yes. So we're going to stay there. Okay, Zach, this has been so great. You've dropped so many nuggets. I cannot thank you enough for being here and spending time and sharing your wisdom and knowledge with us. Tell me how, or not necessarily me, but tell our audience how they can reach out to you. Maybe they want some budget coaching or something, because I know I sure needed it. And I could have used it. I could probably still use it. But how can they reach out to you? How can they find you, like social media, etc.? How can they find you?
Absolutely. So we're on most of the social media. The Instagram and Facebook are my main two right now. I'm trying to focus on Facebook for the time being, so I've got a lot going on there. So if you want social media, check out Facebook, and go to my website is aafinancialcoaching.com.
Thank you again, Zach. And thank you to all of you who tuned in today. Thank you so much. I hope you come back. If you're loving it, just go ahead and continue to click the subscribe button. Tell your friends, share it on all the social media platforms, because feedback is something that we all have to deal with every day, and we can learn to grow from it. So I want to say thank you again for coming and tuning in and listening to From the Suggestion Box, navigating feedback, the good, the bad, and the say what? I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.